welcome to this edition of The Aisle with me, your host, Bianca Rahimi. Today we'll be talking about the leadership race that has already begun in the UK's Labour Party. So what are the criteria in this race and what are the contestants doing to get those votes? Let's find out. We will have to wait until April to know who will succeed Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party. That means while the contest to replace him ensues, he will have to attend quite a few more Prime Minister's questions and respond to Sajid Javid's first budget in March. He will also have to prepare the party for local elections that take place in May.
The IMF now confirming that the UK economy will grow faster than the rest of the Eurozone. When is he going to stop talking Britain down and start recognising the extraordinary achievements of the UK economy?
Wouldn't it be truly wonderful if the Prime Minister answered a question about universal credit? He's dodged every question on it. The reality is that about half of the people going on to universal credit are worse off as a result of it.
So what does the contest look like? Each candidate has just 1 week to get the vote of 22 MPs or MEPs. That means a lot of fast and frenzied rallying of support in Westminster. The second stage takes a month and the candidates can either turn to the constituencies for the backing of 5% of Labour's local parties, or they can vie for the support of 2 trade unions and 1 social society. And thirdly, the candidates that make it through are on the ballot, which opens on February 21st and closes on April the 2nd. The first stage has already happened. Labour leadership candidates Keir Starmer, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips and Emily Thornberry passed the MP and MEP nomination. Then on Tuesday, the 21st of January, firebrand backbencher Jess Phillips dropped out, saying she felt she would struggle to make it onto party members' ballots.
The election defeat that the Labour Party faced at the last general election was cataclysmic. We'll need to win 124 seats just to get a majority of 1. I truly believe that unless we speak to the country on their terms, not just on ours, that we won't be able to make the gains that we need to win an election and do what everyone in the Labour movement wants to do, and that is make people's lives better. In order to do that, the Labour Party will need to select a candidate that can unite all parts of our movement, the union movement, the members, the elected representatives. And I have to be honest with myself, as I said I always would be throughout this campaign, that at this time that person isn't me. In order to win the country, we are going to have to find a candidate in this race who can do all of that and then take that message out to the country of hope and change for things to be better.
Phillips was in third place behind Keir Starmer and Rebecca Long-Bailey with 12% of first preference votes. So who is left? With a comfortable lead, Keir Starmer is highly regarded by both left-wingers and centrists in the party. As Labour's shadow Brexit secretary, he played a key role in the party's eventual backing of a second referendum. Before becoming an MP, he was a human rights lawyer, conducting cases in international courts, including the European Court of Human Rights. Launching his bid, Starmer said that Labour must listen to the public on how to restore trust in our party as a force for good. Rebecca Long-Bailey is viewed in some quarters as the natural successor to Mr Corbyn and describes herself as a proud socialist. Highly regarded by the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, launching her leadership bid, Long-Bailey said the party needs to make the positive case for immigration as a positive force. She also broke with Corbyn over Trident, saying if you have a deterrent, you have to be prepared to use it. Wigan MP Lisa Nandy says she wants to bring Labour home to voters in its traditional strongholds who have abandoned the party. Nandy went on to say that she understands that we have one chance to win back the trust of people in Wigan. A YouGov poll shows that Nandy is the first preference for 6% of party members. And last but not least, Emily Thornberry, who has been critical of her friend Jeremy's handling of the party's Brexit stance, but has remained loyal to him and has represented the Labour Party on various overseas visits. The 59-year-old has been a human rights lawyer and academic. She says she was born into the Labour Party. And after winning back her seat in the same venue as Corbyn, she said,
"We all know the real fight has to begin now to save our country, to save our economy, to save our public services from the worst excesses of Boris Johnson's majority and the terrible consequences of a Johnson Brexit. This duplicitous, gutless, reckless Prime Minister has been elected on one issue alone, wrapping himself in the lie that he is the only person to get Brexit done. But the danger that we all now face is that he will feel empowered to dictate our country's direction on every issue. Well, we may be hurting tonight, but we are not beaten. We will tell Boris Johnson no. Our fight is not over, our fight is just starting, and we will fight with the same spirit that we showed. We will fight with the same courage that my friend Jeremy showed. And we will fight with the same unity the party showed throughout the election campaign.
To add a little bit more context here, all the candidates have voted for triggering Article 50 in the third reading of the EU bill, which began the Brexit process in 2017. In 2015, they all voted against the UK conducting airstrikes in Syria. And when it comes to Trident, Long, Bailey and Nundy voted against renewing the UK's nuclear deterrent in 2016, and Phillips and Starmer voted in favour. Thornbury abstained. So who will the candidates have to woo? There are three groups that can vote: party members, registered supporters that pay £25 to vote, and then there are affiliate groups like trade unions and socialist societies. The new leader will be inheriting a party still reeling from the general election, in which Labour lost many of its faithful constituencies. So the leadership candidates are no doubt desperately trying to conclude what went wrong and decide how to make things right. Was the Labour Party's stance on Brexit not clear enough? Was Jeremy Corbyn not charismatic enough? Or was the manifesto too voluminous? Or were the accusations of anti-Semitism against the party what brought it down?
We took too much baggage into the election, and although there were really strong propositions in the manifesto, we put so much on the table that you couldn't see the wood for the trees. But this is a period of reflecting on all of that, because we've now got a mountain to climb. We didn't wrestle to the ground that mantra, get Brexit done. That resonated on the doorsteps. I went to 44 constituencies and that resonated, and we should have knocked it down, because it's obviously not going to be done anytime soon. So we didn't knock that down. I'm seriously considering standing. I'm talking to colleagues, I'm talking to trade unionists, I'm talking to the right movement, but I'm seriously considering it.
Is that Jeremy was absolutely savaged by the press. His character was taken to pieces from day one. Where we failed is that we didn't develop the message credibly enough. We didn't set the groundwork in place on some of the policies that were announced towards the end of the general election that made it look as though we were just carpet bombing with policies at the end of it. The overarching narrative should have been about aspiration and pride in everything that we do within our communities, and how Labour will ultimately ensure that we achieve that.
Ken Livingstone has been characterised as the only truly successful left-wing British politician of modern times. An English politician praised for his efforts to improve rights for women, LGBT people and ethnic minorities in London. We asked him what he thought the future leader would have to be like.
But I think the most significant thing is to have a leader that people think can be a good Prime Minister, that can turn this country around. Because although Boris won this big majority, I suspect in 4 years' time, people will have turned against Boris, because he's not going to transform our economy. He's not going to create millions of new jobs, rebuild our manufacturing base and so on. He made all these promises, but he won't deliver on them. So there's a brilliant chance of Labour winning the next election under any of these candidates. But clearly most people think Keir Starmer looks like the most competent. And you've got to bear in mind, for a long period he was running Britain's legal system, doing all the prosecutions. And I don't ever recall anyone complaining about the way he's managing it, and he was very progressive, and he helped move the system in the right direction. Keir Starmer and Rebecca Long-Bailey are both going to be able to unite the party and bring it together. And the simple fact is, the Brexit issue's over. We're leaving at the end of this month. The issue now is, how do we protect our economy? And all the Labour candidates were aware of that. They're clearly going to be putting forward good progressive policies to tackle the impact on our economy of leaving with a Boris deal, which will be a pretty grim one.
One of the tools used in the defamation campaign was accusations of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn's handling of that has been slammed over and over in the press and popular TV shows.
Jeremy's policies about bringing the rail system back into public ownership, and these are all quite popular. You've got to bear in mind, I mean, something like a third of all the news coverage was about anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism. And I mean, I remember reading in the Jewish Chronicle an editorial saying he was the worst racist of modern times, worse than the National Front. And a lot of people tend to believe this. They see it's all over websites and so on. I've known Jeremy for 45 years. I've never heard him say anything racist, anti-Semitic, or even sexist. And you can't say that about a lot of Labour MPs.
The final blow just ahead of the election was dealt by the UK's chief rabbi, Ephraim Mirvis, who wrote that the very soul of the nation was at stake, that Corbyn was not fit to be Prime Minister, and that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was a poison sanctioned from the top. Labour's overseas members have been accused of conspiracy mongering after compiling a report that claimed the party's anti-Semitism row was stoked by Israel's government. The report states that Israel is pumping a lot of money into influencing British politics. Ken Livingstone was also accused of anti-Semitism in his day and says MPs are afraid of saying anything that might get them tarred with that same brush.
Someone who's anti-Semitic, who talks about Jews with big noses, Jews running the world banking system, Jews, this secret conspiracy. We've had hundreds of years of that. And if anyone in the Labour Party says that, should be thrown out immediately. But criticising the Israeli government's mistreatment of Palestinians, that's not anti-Semitic. I criticise almost every government around the world. I mean, literally. They all do terrible things. And we just got to get that right. And I think, I remember when I was an MP, a lot of Labour MPs would say, I agreed with what you said about Palestine, but they wouldn't say it themselves, so they feared they'd be denounced as being anti-Semitic.
A few Labour MPs rushing to strike their names off the list of possible anti-Semites are the 5 leadership contenders. They have all backed a 10-point list of pledges set out by the Board of Deputies of British Jews. It almost seems like these were a precondition to them running. The list includes the adoption of the international definition of anti-Semitism with all its examples and clauses, which has received criticism from Palestinian rights groups for silencing valid criticism of Israel. So what is the definition? Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. The definition seems harmless, but there are examples given, and that is where the controversy lies. Manifestations might include the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. And the second line, however, criticism of Israel similar to that levelled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Many have described the definition as imprecise, unclear and quasi-legal, which means it could easily be abused, and the evidence suggests it already has been. Defenders of Israel are using the definition to get the annual Israel Apartheid Week banned on university campuses. People and organizations are being labeled anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel's human rights abuses, and various groups are calling for the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement to be outlawed.
A lot of people think I said Hitler was a Zionist because you had the then Labour MP John Mann organised a television crew to film him shouting at me that I was a Nazi apologist, then launching this big lie that I said Hitler was a Zionist. And this went all on the internet around the world. And even about 18 months ago, there's an article in The Guardian and one in The Observer, our 2 main lefty papers, both repeating this. And I thought, why doesn't any journalist ever pick up the phone and say, did you say Hitler was a Zionist? And I think a lot of people who feel we've overreacted on the question of anti-Semitism. It was because they saw I'd been lied about by a Labour MP. He wasn't disciplined, I was suspended. And the interesting thing is, the disciplinary unit, which was filled with embittered old Blairites who wanted to get rid of Jeremy and me and John McDonnell, they spent 11 months poring over everything I'd said and written. They couldn't find a single anti-Semitic comment at all. And at the opening of the hearing, they said, "We're absolutely clear, we know you're not anti-Semitic," but they still wanted to get rid of me because I was supporting Jeremy. And at that stage, a lot of these old Blairites assumed, we might lose 100 seats in the 2017 election. And I was wandering around saying, Jeremy could win the next election, you know. So we need to be honest. I mean, all this news coverage about anti-Semitism has raised fears in the Jewish community if they believe all of this. And I mean, I saw a poll last year saying something like 29% of Britain's Jews thought they might have to leave Britain if Labour won the election. And spreading this sort of fear is so damaging, I mean, not just to the Labour Party, but to the Jewish community. And it stirs up attacks on the Jewish community, because someone who is anti-Semitic, with all this dominating news, is much more likely to go out and take a punch at somebody Jewish walking by.
The 10 points dictate that MPs like Ken Livingstone never be allowed back into the party. Many are looking on with dismay, wondering what will become of Jeremy Corbyn's unapologetic stance on the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the plight of the people of Gaza in particular. But Labour is still licking its wounds from the general election. The Conservatives are now in government and are making it perfectly clear where their allegiance lies. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised to ban local authorities from supporting a boycott of Israel, and there is also talk of taking down online media outlets critical of Israel, again on the pretext of anti-Semitism.
Britain can't resolve the issue. We have no great influence in the Middle East. It's got to be down to Israel and other countries like Saudi Arabia, who's got massive financial control over so much of the Middle East and so on. So it's not central. One of the things that I find remarkable is that this dominates the news. But every time I criticise the policies of the Saudi Arabian government, it gets no coverage at all. And so I think we should just take this more seriously. You know, the history of the Labour Party is that it was basically the political home for Britain's Jewish community. We had some of the most prominent Jewish MPs, as leading members of our party. And literally, the day I was suspended by the General Secretary of the Labour Party, much to the annoyance of Jeremy Corbyn, something like 80 Jewish Labour Party members published a letter in The Guardian saying in all their time they'd never heard or seen anything anti-Semitic. And I've asked all my Jewish friends who are still in the Labour Party, none of them can ever remember this at all. So it's all been whipped up by the Tory media, basically, because the establishment was terrified if Jeremy became Prime Minister, to go crack down on all their tax dodging. That's really what it was about.
But of course, for the average Briton, what is important is their standard of living, healthcare and security, issues that seem to fall by the wayside in the election. Labour accuses Boris Johnson of catering to the rich and planning to sell off the UK's National Health Service to the US in trade deals that will be the nail in the coffin for an institution that is already being crippled by underfunding and privatisation. In its manifesto, Labour says, "This is our chance to tackle the climate emergency, to end Food Bank Britain and to rewrite the rules of the economy so it works for everyone, not just the billionaires. This is our chance to deliver 1 million genuinely affordable homes and 1 million climate jobs across every region and nation of the UK." It remains to be seen whether the new leadership can get the party back on track so it can fulfil those promises. Observers say that the Labour Party must not fall into the trap set for it, moving further to the centre, thus abandoning its core principles and losing its identity. Well, that's all we have time for this week, so from me, Bianca Rahimi, and the Isle, it's goodbye.